My name's Mikael Gartner, and I'm an engineer and as well as an urban search and rescue specialist. Following the February earthquakes, I was deployed with the US2 team, a USAID OFDA urban search and rescue team, to assist with search and rescue in the Christchurch Earthquake. Subsequently, I was recruited to come back and help with the disaster recovery and demolition and rebuilding of the CBD. So my background is structural engineering. So in that circumstance, I was providing specialist advice on the safe demolition of buildings above 5 stories, some of the most dangerous structures in the CBD, to bring them down and advise contractors as well as their supporting engineers so that there would be a safe and controlled demolition of the CBD, so to move towards disaster, towards recovery. I did a lot of engineering in California, high seismic risk areas, and I actually responded to a small response team ad in California to assist the firefighters and the fire service with our urban search and rescue. And subsequently, I was recruited to go to the FEMA national team, which is one of 28 with LA County Fire Department. And of course, LA County Fire Department has a USAID team, a contract, one of 2 teams in the US. And so as an engineer, I provide safety advice to protect not only the firefighters in an urban search and rescue environment, but also the victims that we rescue. Most of my work has actually been in the US, but have had several deployments overseas with LA County Fire, supporting the USAR engineering component of the rescue. In 2010, we deployed to Haiti and provided about 2 weeks of search and rescue, rescuing live victims. Prior to that, we also deployed to Hurricane Gustav and Ike in Texas, supporting U.S. disaster response. And then after that, it was Christchurch Earthquake response, and following that was the Japanese Tsunami Response. In the international disaster scene, it is USAID and OFDA, the Office for Foreign Disaster Assistance. They essentially make the call and have the funds to deploy either LA County Fire Department, which has a USAID contract, or Virginia Fairfax Urban Search and Rescue. The deployment to New Zealand was actually one of the best experiences we've had as an urban search and rescue team. We usually have to be 10 days self-sufficient. Coming to New Zealand, we had not only support from the US government, but also from the New Zealanders themselves. There's been a long history of relationship between New Zealand and US, sharing information, sharing instructors, putting people through urban search and rescue training programs. So there's already a know-how, people knew each other. It's a small community as well, but there was that cooperation between Kiwis and US that was outstanding, that actually helped us with our disaster response in Christchurch. I'm part of a consulting engineering firm at the moment, so part of my secondment was actually to the Canterbury Earthquake Recovery Authority, and in that instance we were demolishing buildings, of course, but now I've moved back to my consulting engineering firm to actually rebuild the city with new designs. But I think there's definite progress even 2 years on. The New Zealanders, the Kiwis, have the right attitude, they have the can-do attitude, and they can make it happen. Of course, it's maybe a long, tedious process to most, but certain cities that we've seen in the past actually may not even recover. New Zealand and Christchurch actually gone over the hump towards recovery versus, say, Haiti, which still has problems and are still trying to recover. Actually, it's lucky that Christchurch has not only a building code, and an insurance industry, and stakeholders and owners that all want to work together. Of course, those are kind of first world problems in a sense versus developing countries, which may not have the resources and the know-how of trying to get a city back up on its feet. It's interesting, we've actually, right after the earthquake, we usually have what we call lessons learned, and we have after-action reviews. And in those reviews, we actually update our training manuals, update our experiences, share our experiences across the board. I'm also part of the New Zealand Urban Search and Rescue team here, so I've actually transferred over from the LA County Fire Department to New Zealand Search and Rescue. And I've provided some instruction based on lessons learned from other deployments, as well as Christchurch, and vice versa. The Kiwi engineers and the rescue specialists also provide information back to the US so they can improve their training programs as well. There are some pretty interesting disaster scenarios and case studies, because each disaster brings new lessons learned. and improves emergency service all around. Interesting, a lot of the bad apples have been kind of sorted out now, and there's a higher level of thinking to getting buildings to a higher standard performance level. It's not only to protect life, people are actually thinking outside the box and saying, well, I want to protect my asset, I want to protect the building, I want it to fit in the built environment to create a better Christchurch. And that's the kind of mindset you want to keep having. 10 years from now, I definitely see great progress, even in the next few years here. And it might even take 20 years to even get it even better. So there's no doubt there has to be a capital in South Island, and there has to be investors coming in and cooperation from all parties to make it happen. As a New Zealander, part of urban search and rescue, part of the engineering community, it's kind of that willingness to go out and help another community get over the hump towards recovery rather than getting back down to where they were right at the disaster. We donated equipment to New Zealand Urban Search and Rescue, and that was about $1 million worth of equipment. Everything from water and sanitation type equipment for that 10-day period of self-sufficiency, to search cameras, to breaching and breaking equipment, to engineering type equipment, pretty much the gamut of equipment that serves every specialty in the urban search and rescue component of New Zealand, which typically matches also the US structure as well. It's a decision made by USAID, OFDA, and LA County. There is a bit of a process involved of whether the host nation wants to accept that donation and what's the cost to actually bring it back to the US. So we actually did the same thing in Haiti. We actually donated our equipment there after our response, which included also tents and things of that sort, which actually helped as part of the humanitarian assistance. We actually had a second team doing humanitarian assistance in Haiti as well. Now, we also had the Sichuan earthquake in China. We were on standby with LA County Urban Search and Rescue to respond. Now, in that instance, the host nation we didn't respond, but we provided donations. So we actually packaged in Los Angeles urban search and rescue cash, donated to the Chinese, and then actually brought trainers to them to actually do capacity building with them to train them, because they had a need for training their own urban search and rescue personnel. And right now, since USAID, there's another program called the UN International Search and Rescue Advisory Group. Now, the two teams, Fairfax and LA County, are classified under the United Nations system as a heavy rescue team. So deeply entombed victim rescue, live victim rescue. Now, New Zealand has always had a capacity, but they've never been recognized or classified under the United Nations system, which provides coordination between worldwide urban search and rescue groups. So right now, New Zealand Urban Search and Rescue is aiming to getting that classification, and because of the USAID equipment donations, they've actually increased their capacity and potentially are now reconfiguring that so they can get into the UN and CERA classification with great force and greater capability. And they've loved that new equipment. It's also good to have the same equipment, the same training, the same UN coordination, so that a request from the US government to New Zealand can happen. So it's interesting strategically, from what I understand, based on the current strategy of the New Zealand Urban Search and Rescue as well as MFAT, is they have a responsibility for the Pacific region, for the islands. Now, of course, the United Nations has been actually pushing the New Zealand government to get this UN classification, because there's a lack of disaster urban search and rescue teams for the deeply entombed victims in this area versus, say, Europe, which has maybe 30, 40 teams in the region. So in terms of areas of responsibility, there's definitely potential in the Pacific, especially we were on call, for example, for the hurricane in Samoa that just happened in December of this last year. There's definitely a potential to assist maybe China, Indonesia, where there's other risks involved, and definitely overseas, maybe in the US or South America. Now that's expanding beyond maybe sometimes a strategy, but of course you're always willing to help a friend, and that's where the relationship between New Zealand and the US is a benefit. Under the US Urban Search and Rescue Program, we're trained in pretty much all risks, that's what we call it. It's earthquakes, floods, hurricanes, bombings. For example, the Oklahoma City bombing, LA County responded to that. as well. Hurricane Katrina is an example of a response, a national response. You have, for example, we've actually identified in New Zealand volcanic ashfall as a potential hazard because the weight of ash could potentially collapse buildings in the North Island. And of course, you have your typical landslips. For example, New Zealand Urban Search and Rescue actually responded to the Nelson landslides. And there's, of course, smaller emergencies, not the larger category above and beyond disaster response emergencies. The U.S. actually is at the forefront of urban search and rescue research, training. Most countries will actually be will send their personnel to the U.S. for specific training, whether it's at the various centers of excellence in Texas, in Los Angeles, in Nevada, in Alabama. There's all sorts of centers of excellence in the U.S. that foreign countries send their personnel to. An example was, for example, we had met some Israeli personnel in Haiti, and they actually met them in Alabama through some WMD type training. We actually sent New Zealand urban search and rescue engineers to the Bay Area to train them in urban engineering and collapse structure type training. And of course, there's other type of capacity building, also us sending trainers overseas. So there's a lot that goes on in interaction. Now, in terms of the level, I recently went to a kind of a mock exercise in Palmerston North with the New Zealand Urban Search and Rescue team. And looking at their level, they're at that level, if not, and they have their own style as well. Each urban search and rescue has their own style, but they're at a greater level than most other teams around the world. They're at par with the U.S. and probably could even cooperate at that level as well. So I say they're ready. New Zealand's ready. MFAT's ready to get this UN INSARAG classification. Of course, there's always little kinks on the way to sort her out and iron out, but it's definitely there. Yeah, appreciate your time.
Good.
Cheers.
Thank you.